Rich millionaire neglects pregnant wife for mistress until wife finally snaps and leaves him. Ever wonder how quickly a fairy tale marriage can turn into a heart-wrenching tragedy? Meet Rebecca Monroe, a gentle soul who believed she'd married the love of her life, and Thomas Monroe, a self-made millionaire whose charming smile and ambitious spirit once stole her heart. In a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of New York City, Rebecca is expecting their first child, a moment that should bind a couple closer than ever. But shadows lurk in golden corridors. Thomas has a secret mistress, and his pregnant wife's pleas for love go ignored. When heartbreak reaches its peak, Rebecca snaps. Her explosive decision to leave catapults this story into a whirlwind of betrayal, redemption, and twists no one saw coming. When Rebecca Peterson first laid eyes on Thomas Monroe in the elegant lobby of the St. Regis Hotel in Manhattan, it felt like a scene straight out of a romance movie. Rebecca was there to finalize details for her upcoming charity event, a fundraiser for the Children's Heart Foundation. She wasn't a powerful executive or an heiress. She was a kind-hearted event planner who'd quietly built a reputation for hosting successful charity galas. That day, dressed in a simple navy blue sheath dress and modest heels, Rebecca radiated a confident calm that immediately caught Thomas's eye. Thomas, on the other hand, was attending a high-powered networking conference for CEOs. Striding across the marble floor, he exuded magnetic energy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair brushed neatly to one side, and an impeccable Tom Ford suit that screamed wealth and status. A hush seemed to fall over the crowd as he approached. Heads turned whenever he passed by. Everyone in New York's high society circles knew Thomas Monroe, the talented founder of Monroe Innovations, a tech empire that had soared in value almost overnight. Their introduction was orchestrated by pure chance. The conference had booked the same event space that Rebecca's charity needed for its gala. A scheduling mishap forced them into an impromptu meeting to figure out which event would go where and when. It was in the midst of a tense conversation about time slots and venue layouts that Thomas locked eyes with Rebecca. Something unspoken passed between them, a moment so potent that it dissolved the stress from the scheduling conflict. Before they knew it, both agreed on a compromise that benefited everyone. The lingering moment that followed felt downright cinematic. Thomas insisted on walking Rebecca to her car, offering her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. It was there, by her car, that he asked if he could see her again formally, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of surprise and excitement. In a city where everything moved at breakneck speed, this sincere, gentlemanly gesture felt like a breath of fresh air. Rebecca nodded. They exchanged phone numbers. It was the start of what would become a whirlwind romance that onlookers would dub fated. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Thomas invited Rebecca to exclusive soirees on the Upper East Side, and she introduced him to the heartfelt world of charitable endeavors, hospital visits, orphanage fundraisers, and more. They seemed to complement each other perfectly. Thomas's large philanthropic donations shone even brighter, with Rebecca's genuine empathy guiding them. Their combined presence lit up ballrooms, and every society page in the tabloids documented this power couple that seemed to have it all. The most thrilling part was that, beneath the glitz, their connection felt sincere. Rebecca had her own modest childhood memories, and had worked tirelessly to build her successful event planning business. She admired Thomas's ambition, but what truly captivated her was his vulnerability stories of how, as a boy in Queens, he'd watched his father struggle to pay rent. Those memories drove him to become the powerful entrepreneur he was. They bonded over stories of humble beginnings, unstoppable dreams, and the desire to give back to the world. Nobody was surprised when Thomas proposed to Rebecca at a rooftop dinner overlooking Central Park. Dressed in a white tuxedo, he got down on one knee with a breathtaking diamond ring from Tiffany's. Tearfully, Rebecca said yes. The tabloids exploded with headlines. Tech mogul Thomas Monroe engaged to charitable powerhouse Rebecca Peterson. High-profile friends applauded the couple at a lavish engagement party at the Waldorf Astoria, rumored to cost over $1 million. The wedding, set months later, was equally grand, but still touched by Rebecca's trademark sincerity, a tasteful blend of extravagance and compassion. From the outside, their marriage looked like a storybook dream, but behind the closed doors of their gleaming penthouse on Fifth Avenue, small cracks began to form. The kind of cracks that, while invisible in the rush of newlywed bliss, eventually break even the mightiest foundation. Thomas and Rebecca's first year of marriage sparkled with excitement. They honeymooned in Seychelles, basking in the golden sun with turquoise waters stretching out before them. They traveled through Europe, buying antique furniture in Paris and exploring hidden vineyards in Tuscany. Rebecca decorated their penthouse with personal touches, family photographs, souvenirs from their travels, and little notes that embodied her warmth. However, soon after their honeymoon, Thomas's business began to expand even more rapidly. Monroe Innovations had launched a new line of artificial intelligence products that attracted international investors. Meetings with venture capitalists, constant flights to Silicon Valley, and late-night strategic sessions occupied more and more of Thomas's time. At first, Rebecca found the busyness thrilling. She was proud of Thomas's achievements and supported him wholeheartedly. She'd grown up hearing that behind every successful man stood a supportive woman, and she was determined to be that anchor for him. Yet, as months passed, the novelty wore off. Thomas began missing dinner dates, coming home after midnight and leaving before dawn. In the mornings, Rebecca often woke to an empty bed, only to find a sweet but impersonal text message: "Off to an early meeting, love you." The emotional distance that was creeping in felt alien to Rebecca. When she confronted him one evening, Thomas offered a plausible explanation: "I'm doing this for us, for our future family." His smooth voice and the exhaustion etched into his eyes made her heart soften. She understood that building an empire was no small feat. Meanwhile, their social circle expanded. Thomas's business partners, shareholders, and prominent lobbyists filled their weekends. It seemed like every other day they were hosting dinner parties at their penthouse, with name-brand catering, live jazz bands, and carefully curated guest lists. Rebecca, ever the gracious hostess, ensured each party flowed seamlessly, yet she often felt overshadowed. The men talked shop around Thomas stocks, acquisitions, technology breakthroughs. Conversations with the women, too, often revolved around money designer labels, real estate investments, and yacht clubs. Rebecca sometimes felt out of place, craving genuine connections rather than superficial small talk. Despite these challenges, Rebecca never doubted Thomas's devotion until subtle signs told her something was amiss. He guarded his phone more carefully, stepping aside for certain calls. Familiar warmth faded from his gaze. The shift was slight at first, but day by day it grew impossible to ignore. One crisp autumn evening, after another lavish dinner party concluded, Rebecca gathered empty champagne flutes and half-eaten desserts, quietly observing Thomas in the corner of the living room. He was deep in conversation with a tall, elegant brunette named Olivia King, a venture capitalist from London who had soared onto the New York scene. Thomas spoke in low, animated tones, his eyes occasionally flickering with intensity. Olivia laughed, tilting her head in a gesture of rapt attention. A small pang of jealousy flickered in Rebecca's chest, but she dismissed it as mere nerves. In the days that followed, Olivia's presence seemed to loom everywhere. She turned up at networking events, board meetings, and charity functions, always poised, always with that same flirtatio us laugh. Rebecca noticed how Thomas gravitated toward her, how they exchanged inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else in the room. But Thomas dismissed any worry. Rebecca voiced. "Don't be ridiculous," he said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Olivia's just another investor. She's important for the next funding round. You don't have to worry." The seeds of doubt were sown, though, and as the demands of Monroe Innovations soared, Thomas grew more distant at home. He started traveling frequently: San Francisco, London, Berlin. Rebecca was left alone in a penthouse that felt too large and too quiet, where the ticking of the grandfather clock only magnified her loneliness. Wanting some semblance of normalcy, Rebecca continued her charity work. She planned a fundraising gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, intending to raise money for an underfunded pediatric hospital in Harlem. She poured herself into the event, hoping Thomas might take notice and share in her passion for good causes like he used to. When she asked if he could attend, he simply sighed. "I have back-to-back meetings that day. I'll try to drop by if I can." The night of the gala arrived. Rebecca stood at the entrance, greeting donors in a flowing emerald gown. Her hair was styled in a classic chignon, and though her smile lit up the entire museum, there was an ache underneath it. She kept glancing at the grand doors, waiting for Thomas to sweep in with his charismatic flair. Midnight came and went. He never arrived. In the early hours, a text message buzzed on her phone. "Sorry, got held up. Proud of you. See you at home." The disappointment stung. This was the second major event he had missed, and something inside her was beginning to crack. Rebecca returned home alone, wearing the same emerald gown. The penthouse was dark. She made her way to the bedroom, heart heavy, only to find Thomas asleep, phone lying inches from his hand. A bright notification flashed on the screen. When she instinctively glanced at it, her stomach lurched. A message from Olivia. It read, "Thinking of you. Can't wait for tomorrow's meeting, just the two of us." That night, Rebecca slept in the guest room for the first time in their marriage. Eyes wide open, thoughts buzzing with heartbreak. The tension between them was almost palpable the next morning. Thomas, haggard, apologized for missing the gala, but offered no real explanation besides work. Rebecca, exhausted from heartbreak, left to finalize her event's finances. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Is Olivia just a friend? Why is he distancing himself like this? Where did my loving husband go? Life took a drastic turn when, a week later, Rebecca missed her period. Initially dismissing it as stress, she decided to check with a pregnancy test. She stared at the positive result in disbelief, heart pounding. She took another, then another. All confirmed the same news. She was pregnant. A flood of emotions took over. She was elated, yet terrified. She imagined Thomas's excitement, hoping this baby might reawaken the closeness they once shared. That evening, she prepared a candlelit dinner pasta carbonara with a side of Caesar salad, an homage to their first official date. She anxiously waited for Thomas to come home. But as the hours dragged by, the dinner grew cold and the candles burned low. Rebecca's anxiousness turned to anger. Finally, at nearly 11 o'clock, Thomas walked in, looking surprised by the elaborate setup. "What's all this?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I wanted to surprise you." Rebecca forced a smile. She tried to ignore the faint perfume that clung to his jacket, a scent that wasn't hers. "I have some news." Thomas looked at the cold food and the dwindling candles, guilt flickering across his face. "Rebecca, I'm sorry I'm so late." She cut him off. "I'm pregnant." She let the words linger, her heart pounding. Thomas paused, the color draining from his face, replaced by an emotion Rebecca couldn't quite decipher. "Pregnant?" He approached her, placing a tentative hand on her shoulder. Are you sure?" Rebecca nodded, tears threatening to spill. Yes, I'm sure. For a moment, Thomas seemed overwhelmed. He held her face gently, leaning in to kiss her forehead. That's incredible, he said, though his voice lacked the exuberance she had expected. She tried to catch his gaze, searching for the spark of happiness that once burned so brightly. His eyes, however, looked distant. Even in this monumental moment, his mind seemed elsewhere. Still, Rebecca clung to hope. She believed that once the initial shock wore off, Thomas would realize the blessing they'd been given. She envisioned them shopping for baby clothes, decorating a nursery, and sharing the news with loved ones. The possibility of reconnection gave her strength. Yet the days that followed told a different story. Thomas remained as busy as ever. He barely inquired about Rebecca's doctor visits, and if she brought up baby-related topics, he'd nod absently, then excuse himself to answer a work call or dive into emails. Tension grew, and so did Rebecca's desperation for a meaningful connection. Thomas's relationship with Olivia King escalated in ways Rebecca could no longer ignore. She overheard phone calls at odd hours, some hushed conversation about meeting in private. When she dared question him, Thomas deflected with frustration. Olivia's an essential part of the New Deal, he would insist. If we land her investment firm, Monroe Innovations will skyrocket. Yet, it wasn't just about business. The text messages Rebecca occasionally glimpsed bordered on affectionate inside jokes, dinner plans that extended late into the night. Once, she noticed a lipstick stain on his shirt collar, a stark burgundy hue that definitely wasn't Rebecca's more subdued palette. Meanwhile, Rebecca's pregnancy marched on. Nausea, mood swings, and the constant swirl of hormones hit her hard. She attended her prenatal checkups mostly alone, until one day her friend Sarah Davis accompanied her for moral support. Sarah had been Rebecca's roommate in college, and though she lived in Los Angeles now, she happened to be in town for a short visit. During the ultrasound appointment, Rebecca and Sarah watched the monitor in awe, listening to the rapid whoosh of the baby's heartbeat. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes, tears of amazement, wonder, and a looming sadness that Thomas wasn't there to share in this precious moment. That evening, armed with ultrasound pictures, Rebecca tried to discuss the experience with Thomas. "You won't believe how clear the heartbeat was," she said softly, gently showing him the black and white printouts. "I hope you can come next time." Thomas glanced up from his laptop. "It looks great," he said, giving a cursory glance before turning back to his screen. His phone buzzed. He picked it up instantly. "Sorry, I need to take this." She watched him walk out of the living room, phone pressed to his ear. Her eyes drifted to the ultrasound photos. The hollow ache in her chest intensified. In that moment, she felt lonelier than she ever had in her life, carrying the weight of a child she longed to share with her husband, only to find he was emotionally absent. Thomas's lateness became habitual. Some nights he didn't come home at all, claiming emergency business situations as the cause. Whenever Rebecca tried to confront him, he either brushed her off or dismissed her concerns. The word overreacting was thrown around more than once, driving a wedge deeper between them. During an evening at a tech conference in Las Vegas, Thomas extended his trip under the pretense of meeting new investors. Photos surfaced on social media, Thomas, Olivia, and a group of well-dressed business associates partying at an exclusive nightclub. The images showed Thomas and Olivia standing a bit too close, their smiles too intimate. Rebecca saw them the next morning, courtesy of a concerned acquaintance, and the blow felt like a physical punch to her stomach. Struggling with morning sickness and heartbreak, Rebecca dialed Thomas's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. She left a trembling message. "Thomas, I'm worried. You've been gone for days, and I'm seeing pictures people are talking. Please call me back." She never received a response. When Thomas finally returned, he seemed unapologetic, even irritated. "You're acting paranoid," he said, tossing his suitcase onto the bed. "I told you Olivia is crucial for the business. We were sealing deals. Sometimes that means entertaining clients. You know how it goes, but those photos were taken out of context. He cut her off. I'm tired of explaining myself. Can you just trust me? Rebecca stared at him, tears threatening to spill once more. This was not the man she married. The shift was almost unrecognizable. Instead of being loving and supportive to his pregnant wife, he had become distant, cold, and dismissive. Yet a small part of her clung to the hope that there was an explanation she simply didn't see. In a last-ditch effort, she proposed therapy, couples counseling. Thomas brushed it aside. I don't have time for that, Rebecca, he muttered, rolling his eyes. We need to focus on the baby and my business. We don't need a stranger telling us how to run our marriage. Her heart sank, but she resolved to endure. She was pregnant, after all, and she still loved him, fiercely loved the memory of the man who had once knelt on a rooftop and promised her the world. By the time Rebecca reached her second trimester, she had developed a persistent sense of dread. On the outside, she maintained appearances, still attending charity events, though she cut back on working full-time due to her pregnancy's strain. She faked smiles at business dinners, receiving polite but pitying nods from those who suspected something was wrong. It was at one such function, a high-profile banquet at Cipriani's, that tensions escalated publicly. Thomas and Rebecca arrived together, yet no sooner had they stepped into the grand venue than Thomas disappeared by Olivia's side. Rebecca, left awkwardly alone, pretended to be engrossed in conversation with a gallery owner from Chelsea. But she couldn't ignore the stares. People whispered behind their champagne flutes, pointing out how Thomas doted on Olivia, the mistress. Later that evening, in front of the gilded bathrooms, Rebecca confronted Thomas, voice shaking with anger. Can't you see everyone is talking? You're humiliating me, she whispered, trying to keep a low tone so as not to create a scene. Thomas's jaw tightened. I'm doing what's necessary for my business, he hissed. Stop making a public spectacle. Before she could respond, Olivia emerged from the women's restroom. She cast a glance at Rebecca, offering a sickly sweet smile that made Rebecca's blood run cold. Everything all right here? Olivia asked, feigning innocence. Rebecca's fists clenched. She wanted to scream at Olivia, to demand an explanation or to claw back the husband she felt slipping away. But one glance at Thomas's stone-cold expression told her she'd only be humiliating herself further. She took a deep breath and stormed out, tears stinging her eyes. A swirl of conflicting emotions raged inside her, humiliation, fury, hurt, and yet she was pregnant. She felt trapped, tethered to a man who was increasingly unrecognizable. Weeks passed, and Rebecca tried coping the best she could. She focused on her prenatal care, forging a fragile inner peace that hinged on the baby's health. Her best friend, Sarah Davis, called daily, offering emotional support from across the country. Even her parents, who lived in rural Pennsylvania, sensed something was wrong. Come stay with us for a while, her mother urged over the phone, her voice lined with concern. Rebecca hesitated. Part of her wanted to flee, to escape the penthouse with its memories of a distant fairy tale. Another part feared that leaving might mean giving up on her marriage entirely. She still remembered those heartfelt moments with Thomas, his vow to cherish her, the promise of a better life for their future family. Her tipping point came on a stormy afternoon. The sky was grey, thunder rolled in the distance, and rain pelted the windows with relentless force. Rebecca was in the master bedroom, sifting through baby catalogues, trying to pick out a crib. She realized with a jolt that Thomas hadn't even asked about the nursery. He had no idea which room would house their child or what decorations might bring comfort to a newborn. She decided then and there to address it. She marched to Thomas's study, where he was hunched over his laptop. Without knocking, she opened the door and found him startled, quickly minimizing a messaging screen. On it, she'd glimpsed Olivia's name. Her breath caught, but she swallowed her rage, determined to speak calmly. "Thomas," she began, voice trembling with hurt. "We need to talk about the baby, about us." He pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. "Not now, Rebecca. I'm in the middle of something important. This can't wait." Her voice cracked. "I can't do this alone. You're never here. And when you are here, you're distant. You're acting like this baby is nothing but an inconvenience." Thomas exhaled loudly, spinning around in his chair. "You're exaggerating. I have responsibilities. This deal with Olivia is crucial. If you weren't so caught up in your emotions, you'd see that." Rebecca stiffened. "Caught up in my emotions? I'm pregnant with your child. How could I not be emotional? What do you want me to say?" He snapped, raising his voice in a way he never had before. "Yes, I'm busy. Yes, I rely on Olivia. You want me to throw away a billion-dollar opportunity just to sit around picking out cribs?" The words felt like a dagger to her heart. For a moment, the thunder outside seemed to echo her pain. She took a shaky step backward. "I just want my husband," she whispered. "The man who told me he wanted this baby, who used to hold me and promise me the world." Thomas's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it, and Rebecca noticed it was Olivia calling. Without hesitation, he picked up. "Yes," he answered, turning slightly away from Rebecca, as though she didn't exist. That was it, the snap. Something inside Rebecca shattered. The rage, the heartbreak, the humiliation, it all boiled over into a single, life-altering decision. She stepped out of the study, quietly closed the door, and walked to the master bedroom. With trembling hands, she began throwing clothes into a suitcase. Rebecca felt numb as she packed a few essentials: maternity wear, important documents, her prenatal vitamins, and the ultrasound pictures. She paused, looking at the framed photo of her and Thomas on their wedding day. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't allow herself to dwell. She had to leave. Her unborn child's well-being came first. Determined, she wheeled the suitcase to the elevator. Usually, a staff member would assist with the elevator in their luxurious building, but at this hour, no one was around. Every clunk and rattle of the elevator was amplified by her thudding heart. When she reached the lobby, she hurried past the doorman, a kindly older gentleman named Charles, who always greeted her with a smile. He noticed her suitcase and looked concerned. "Everything all right, Miss S. Monroe?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she lied, forcing a tight smile. "Just visiting my parents for a while." He nodded, his brow furrowed. She hailed a taxi in the pouring rain, slid into the back seat, and gave the driver an address in New Jersey, her friend Allison Lee's house, a close confidant she knew wouldn't judge. Once the taxi sped away, Rebecca exhaled a shaky breath. She felt terror and relief simultaneously. She was leaving behind a life of luxury, but also heartbreak and betrayal. Inside the taxi, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Thomas's name lit up. A part of her expected him to chase after her, to beg her to return. But she was done hoping. She let the call go to voicemail. Then she turned off her phone, tears silently rolling down her cheeks as she stared out at the rain-swept city. Allison Lee lived in a modest suburban neighborhood in Newark, a cozy home decorated with warm colors and photographs of her own family. When Rebecca arrived, drenched from the rain, Allison opened the door and enveloped her in a tight hug. "Oh, Becky," Allison murmured, rubbing circles on her back. "I'm so sorry." Rebecca broke down, sobbing into her friend's shoulder. After she calmed down somewhat, they sat in the living room with steaming cups of herbal tea. Rebecca recounted the past months, the suspicions, the missed events, Olivia's looming presence, and Thomas's gradual emotional detachment. Allison's eyes flashed with anger. That man is unbelievable. And that Olivia, I never trusted her. She always had that cunning look. She placed a comforting hand on Rebecca's knee. "You're safe here. Stay as long as you need. My home is your home." Over the next week, Rebecca tried to find some semblance of stability. She helped Alison with household chores, took slow walks around the neighborhood to clear her mind, and even tagged along to Alison's community events. The humdrum of suburban life was a welcome change from the suffocating opulence of the penthouse. But the emotional turmoil didn't fade easily. Nights were the worst. Rebecca would often wake in a cold sweat, haunted by nightmares of Thomas and Olivia. She would press a hand to her growing belly, reminding herself that she was fighting for more than just her own heart. She was fighting for her child's future, a future that deserved love, stability, and peace. Meanwhile, Thomas's calls and texts piled up. When Rebecca finally turned her phone on, messages came flooding in. "Where are you? We need to talk. This is crazy. Come home. Don't do anything stupid, remember. You're pregnant. Becky, please, at least let me hear your voice." For days she ignored them, but the messages kept coming, turning from anger to desperation, then to apologies. She was torn. Part of her wanted to hear him out, to cling to the faint hope that her husband might realize the error of his ways. Another part of her burned with bitterness. Why had it taken her leaving for him to show any sign of remorse? One afternoon, as she was resting in the guest room, her phone vibrated again. Another call from Thomas. With a trembling hand, she pressed answer. "What do you want?" she said curtly. There was a pause. Then his voice, low and filled with tension. "Rebecca, where are you?" "I'm worried sick," she scoffed. "Worried about your reputation, perhaps? Or did Olivia King threaten to pull out of your precious deal if you didn't show a little more concern?" His sigh crackled through the line. "No, it's not like that. Please, I know I messed up. I want you to come home. We can work this out. Work this out. You didn't seem interested in that before. Things are different now," he insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. "I realize what I stand to lose. I can't lose you or our child." Rebecca swallowed the lump in her throat. She thought of all the nights she cried herself to sleep, all the times she had begged for his attention, only to be dismissed. "You should have realized that when I was still in the house, Thomas." He fell silent, seemingly at a loss for words. After a few seconds he spoke again, quietly. "Can we at least meet in person? Just talk, please." Rebecca hesitated. She knew it was risky. A single meeting might unravel the shaky resolve she'd built, but a part of her also longed for closure or perhaps an explanation. "Fine," she said after a beat. "Tomorrow. We can meet at the cafe near the old library in Midtown. You have exactly 1 hour." The next day, Rebecca traveled back into New York City by train. She'd wrapped herself in a loose-fitting coat to hide her growing belly, though it was increasingly difficult to do so. A dull anxiety gnawed at her. She braced herself for the onslaught of old memories as she navigated familiar streets. The cafe was a small, quaint spot they used to frequent during their dating days. Rebecca arrived early, settling into a corner table with a view of the door. She sipped ginger tea to calm her queasy stomach. When Thomas walked in, her heart clenched at the sight of him. He looked tired, his once magnetic aura now dimmed by guilt. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Becky," he said, quietly sliding into the seat across from her. He reached for her hand, but she quickly pulled away. A flash of hurt crossed his features. She cut right to the chase. "Say what you need to say," Thomas sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm sorry, I've been a fool. I was so consumed by expanding Monroe Innovations that I lost sight of what truly matters." Rebecca waited, arms folded. She noticed how his eyes flicked to her belly, a flicker of something like concern or regret crossing his face. "I should never have neglected you." I know Olivia looks suspicious, but I swear it's only business." His voice trembled with what seemed like sincerity. "Yes, she's flirtatious, but it's just how she is. I never thought of being unfaithful to you, Becky. That's the truth." Her gaze hardened. "Then why does she act like she's your partner in more than just business? Why has everyone in our social circle whispered behind my back that you two are involved?" Thomas shook his head, rubbing his temples. "Rumors, gossip. She's an essential part of this acquisition deal. It's one of the biggest expansions in tech. We had to court investors, attend parties, sometimes until late at night. It looks bad, I admit, but it was always for the company. For us, a wave of frustration crashed over Rebecca. There's a difference between working on a deal and letting your pregnant wife face humiliating gossip alone. If it was purely business, then why didn't you nip these rumors in the bud? Why didn't you truly reassure me before I walked out?" Thomas lowered his head. "I guess I was arrogant. I figured you'd understand or that it would blow over. And the truth is, I liked the excitement of chasing that massive deal. I forgot to balance my life. I forgot you needed me, and that I needed you too." Silence settled between them. The clink of cups and chatter from other customers felt oddly distant. Rebecca leaned back, arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "Thomas, I'm pregnant with your child. It's not just about me, it's about this baby. You promised me a life of partnership, of a loving family. You left me alone in that penthouse, at events, at an ultrasound appointment, without so much as a phone call. Do you realize how crushed I felt?" His eyes clouded with remorse. "I'm sorry, Becky. I'll do anything to make it right. Come home. We'll see a counselor. I'll scale back on my travels. Please." For a fleeting second, hope fluttered in Rebecca's chest. She studied Thomas's face. Was he truly repentant, or was he just panicking because she finally left? She inhaled, steadying her voice. "I don't know if I can trust you. Not after everything." Thomas reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. "It's a confirmation. I cancelled the rest of my upcoming trips. I told Olivia I'm stepping back from negotiations in London, and I scheduled an appointment at a marriage counselor's office next Tuesday. Please, at least consider giving me a chance." Rebecca glanced at the paper, her throat tightening with emotion. She wanted to believe him, to believe that the man she fell in love with still existed beneath the layers of ambition and neglect. But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. "I need time to think," she said softly, pushing the paper back toward him. "I appreciate this, but I'm not ready to come home." Thomas nodded, blinking away what looked like tears. "I understand. I just want you to know I do love you, Becky. I love our baby, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." She stood up, feeling her chest tighten. "I have to go. I'll be in touch." He rose as well, looking like he wanted to hug her, but he withheld. As Rebecca left the cafe, she fought back tears, her mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. Heartbreak, hope, anger, and a fragile desire for reconciliation. Days turned into weeks. Rebecca remained at Allison's, trying to piece together the broken shards of her life. Thomas's overtures continued. He sent flowers, baby gifts, apology letters. He forwarded her details of cancelled business trips, proof that he was stepping back from the relentless grind. On paper, it seemed like he was truly changing. Yet a part of Rebecca still questioned everything. Then came the twist she never expected, a whisper from another quarter. A friend, someone who worked at a rival tech company, confided in her that Olivia King was notorious for leveraging personal relationships to secure high-stakes deals. According to rumors, she had a pattern: cozy up to powerful men, become indispensable, and once the deal closed, she moved on to her next conquest. Rebecca's heart pounded when she heard this. If it was true, then perhaps Olivia's closeness with Thomas really had been about business. But it still didn't excuse Thomas's negligence, nor did it erase the humiliating rumors that plagued Rebecca for months. To get clarity, Rebecca made a bold move. She contacted Olivia King directly. Finding her number from an old message she'd seen on Thomas's phone, Rebecca called, half expecting to be ignored. Surprisingly, Olivia answered. "Well, if it isn't Miss S. Munro," Olivia said, her British accent dripping with condescension. "To what do I owe this honor?" Rebecca's stomach tightened. She took a steadying breath. "I want the truth, Olivia. Were you involved with my husband beyond business?" A mocking laugh floated through the phone. "Are you really calling to ask that? My dear, if Thomas were cheating on you, would he be so obvious? He's far too smart to jeopardize his precious image that way." Rebecca's grip on the phone tightened. "So, you're claiming nothing happened? Thomas and I have been working together. Yes. We've traveled, we've celebrated. Investors demand a certain level of hospitality, as I'm sure you know. But if you're asking about romance," she paused, and Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. "I don't dip my pen in the company ink." She gave a short, cold laugh, and Thomas never pursued it either. "Believe what you will, darling." The line went dead. Rebecca set the phone down, her mind reeling. Olivia could be lying, but her mocking tone suggested she had no reason to hide if the rumor was indeed false. Had Thomas truly not cheated on her? And if so, how did all of this spiral so badly? The revelation rattled Rebecca. For months, she had believed Thomas was having a sordid affair. While his neglect was real, the actual infidelity might not be. And that changed her perspective on everything. She realized how fear and rumors had eroded her trust, how isolation and loneliness amplified her insecurities. Thomas still bore responsibility. He had chosen to push her aside for business. He had allowed suspicion to fester. But the path to redemption might be more possible than she'd imagined. One evening, she pulled out the list of therapists Thomas had sent her. She sat on Alison's couch, laptop on her knees, reading reviews for each. Something stirred in her heart, curiosity, a glimmer of hope. Maybe she owed it to herself and her unborn child to see if Thomas truly meant to change. She dialed a number. "Hello," she said when a warm voice answered. "I'd like to confirm an appointment. Marriage counseling with Dr. Eva Richards next Tuesday." Rebecca agreed to attend the session, but she remained cautious. She met Thomas at the psychologist's office, a cozy suite adorned with calming artwork and plush armchairs. Soft music played in the background, meant to soothe frazzled nerves. Dr. Eva Richards, a woman with kind brown eyes and an empathetic smile, welcomed them. She offered them water, encouraged them to sit, and asked open-ended questions about their relationship. Rebecca spoke first, recounting the emotional neglect, the missed milestones, and her heartbreak. Thomas listened, head bowed in shame. When it was Thomas's turn, he explained the relentless pressure he felt to expand his company, how it became an all-consuming mission to secure a future for his family, the best hospitals, the best schools for our child, he said. In his eyes, he was protecting them from the poverty he'd known as a child. But he admitted he went about it the wrong way, ignoring his wife's emotional needs and fueling rumors instead of confronting them. Dr. Richards led them through exercises designed to foster empathy. At one point, they held hands, stared into each other's eyes, and spoke honestly about what they felt. Rebecca's tears flowed freely as she whispered, "I felt abandoned." Thomas squeezed her hands and choked out, "I was blind, Becky. I'm so sorry." The session lasted over an hour. By the end, they left with a glimmer of renewed understanding, though forgiveness would take time. Outside, Thomas asked if she would join him for lunch. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. Over soup and salad at a quiet bistro, they spoke more openly than they had in months. Rebecca recounted her fears, the isolation, and the suspicion about Olivia. Thomas apologized repeatedly, clarifying that he'd never intended to cross the line with Olivia, though he acknowledged his behavior invited that misunderstanding. For the first time since she'd left, Rebecca glimpsed the man she fell in love with a mixture of ambition and vulnerability. When he gently placed a hand on her belly, asking about the baby's progress, she saw genuine concern shining in his eyes. In the following weeks, Rebecca continued staying at Allison's, but she met Thomas for counseling sessions twice a week. They tackled deep-seated issues: Thomas's fear of poverty, Rebecca's longing for emotional security, their struggles with communication. Dr. Richards guided them with patience, praising their willingness to work together. Thomas also made tangible changes. He announced his temporary leave from Monroe Innovations to focus on personal matters. He delegated major responsibilities to a trusted executive team. This decision shocked the tech world. Media outlets buzzed with speculation, but for once, Thomas didn't seem to care about the headlines. Instead, he visited baby stores with Rebecca, helped her pick out a crib, and even accompanied her to a prenatal appointment. Seeing him in the waiting room, holding her hand as the ultrasound wand glided over her belly, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. At each checkup, they heard the steady gallop of the baby's heartbeat. Thomas's gaze would soften, and Rebecca felt a fragile bond rekindling between them. They even started discussing baby names, Thomas suggesting Elijah if it was a boy, after his grandfather, and Rebecca favoring Cassandra if it was a girl, after her late grandmother. However, the path to reconciliation wasn't without hiccups. Rebecca still harbored resentment. She snapped at Thomas for minor things, her anger a residue of the trauma. Thomas, in turn, occasionally relapsed into old habits, sneaking a glance at work emails instead of focusing on her. But these moments grew less frequent as they learned better ways to communicate. Just when it seemed progress was being made, another storm brewed. A tabloid article appeared, insinuating that Thomas had indeed carried on an affair with Olivia King. Anonymous sources claimed they witnessed intimate behavior behind the scenes at conferences. The story spread like wildfire online, fueling social media gossip. Rebecca read the article in horror. She felt her newfound trust falter. Was Olivia lying during that phone call? Was Thomas playing her all along? She confronted him in a heated argument. "They have sources, Thomas. They claim they saw you too." Thomas looked furious. "It's garbage journalism, Becky. Anyone can lie. Olivia and I had a direct conversation yesterday. She told me someone threatened to leak false claims for money. It's pure blackmail." She stared at him, tears brimming. "But how do I know you're telling the truth?" Thomas's voice trembled. "I understand your doubt, but Dr. Richards said we need honesty. So here it is. I never slept with Olivia. I never cheated on you. I'm willing to take a polygraph, release my personal phone records, anything you want to prove it." The sincerity in his eyes, combined with the progress they'd made in therapy, made Rebecca pause. She realized how easy it was for rumors to spiral in high-profile circles, and how naive she might have been to assume tabloids always had the truth. Slowly, the spark of trust reignited. To quash the rumors, Thomas released a public statement. "My wife and I are committed to each other and to our growing family. Any rumors of an affair with Miss Olivia King are completely false. We regret that private matters have become fodder for tabloid speculation." Olivia King, for her part, also issued a short statement denying any personal involvement with Thomas. Her tone was curt and businesslike, but it served its purpose. Over time, public interest moved on. The rumor died down, replaced by the next sensational headline. For Rebecca, seeing Thomas publicly defend their marriage was significant. She felt a sense of validation, something she'd longed for when she was alone in that penthouse, feeling invisible. By the time Rebecca reached her 8th month of pregnancy, her belly had grown round and radiant. Thomas organized a grand baby shower, but with a twist, he insisted on a charity element. Instead of gifts, he requested donations to a local shelter for single mothers. The gesture touched Rebecca deeply, reminding her of the man she once knew, the man who cared about giving back as much as gaining success. Friends and family gathered at a sunlit garden, decorated with pastel balloons and flowers. Even Sarah Davis flew in from Los Angeles. People mingled, played baby-themed games, and took photos with the mum-to-be. Rebecca wore a simple white maternity dress that highlighted her glow. Thomas hovered near her, ensuring she had everything she needed: food, water, a chair whenever she felt tired. His devotion that day radiated sincerity. Watching him laugh with her friends, place protective hands over her belly, and quietly boast about her strength to the guests, Rebecca felt a slow, careful healing in her heart. Though the wounds of the past were deep, they were no longer fresh. She could imagine a future where they continued to work on their marriage, day by day, for the sake of each other and their child. 3 weeks before her due date, Rebecca went into labor unexpectedly. She woke in the middle of the night with sharp pains. Thomas, half asleep, jolted awake at her cries and immediately sprang into action. He called their doctor, grabbed the hospital bag they'd prepared, and helped Rebecca into the car. During the tense drive to the hospital, she clung to his hand. Despite the pain, she felt comforted by his presence, recalling how different things had been just months ago when she feared facing motherhood alone. Now, though uncertain, she believed in his promise to stand by her side. The labor was long and intense, lasting over 14 hours. Thomas stayed in the delivery room the entire time. He paced, offered ice chips, massaged her back, and whispered words of encouragement. At one point, when Rebecca's contractions grew nearly unbearable, she saw tears in his eyes. "I'm here," he kept repeating. "I'm here." Finally, at dawn, their son was born. The doctor placed the squirming newborn on Rebecca's chest. He let out a hearty cry, and Thomas burst into tears, pressing kisses to Rebecca's forehead and murmuring a stream of thank yous to her, to fate, to everything that led them to this moment. Rebecca, tears flowing, looked at their son with awe. He was a tiny miracle, a living testament that love could persevere through heartbreak if given a chance to heal. They named him Elijah Monroe, honoring Thomas's grandfather. In that instant, all the pain, the betrayal, the sorrow, they seemed eclipsed by an overwhelming joy. They were a family. In the weeks that followed, adjusting to parenthood was a challenge. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the emotional roller coaster of caring for a newborn tested them further. But this time, Thomas did not vanish behind a mountain of work. He woke up for night feedings, changed diapers, and paced the floor with baby Elijah when he was fussy. He insisted on being a hands-on father. Rebecca often watched him in quiet wonder. She saw him gently cradle Elijah, humming lullabies she never knew he remembered. She felt gratitude blossoming. Though the scars from the past lingered, they were healing. The house, once a stage for heartbreak, now filled with the coos and cries of a new life, reminding them daily of what truly mattered. Their marriage wasn't perfect, it never could be, but they were learning to navigate conflict with honesty, to prioritize communication over assumptions. Dr. Richards continued to guide them through postnatal sessions, ensuring they addressed any lingering resentment. It was a slow process, but one they embarked on willingly. One evening, after putting Elijah to bed, they curled up on the couch together. Thomas slid his arm around Rebecca's shoulders, pulling her close. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of peace, earned, tested, and real. Rebecca looked up at him, eyes shining with emotion. "I never thought we'd make it back here." she admitted, voice trembling. There were times I thought I'd be raising Elijah on my own. Thomas kissed her softly, a gesture of both apology and devotion. I promise, he whispered, I will never let you feel alone again. And for the first time, Rebecca truly believed him. Thank you for joining us on this turbulent journey, from glittering penthouse dreams to shattered hearts, and, finally, toward the hope of a renewed love. Rebecca's decision to leave was the catalyst that awakened Thomas to the peril of losing everything that mattered most. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, resilience, and redemption, reminding us that even the mightiest storms can sometimes lead to clearer, brighter skies if both sides are willing to work for it. If this story moved you, made you gasp at the twists, or touched a corner of your heart, please consider supporting this channel. Like, share, and subscribe for more real-life drama fiction that explores life's biggest trials and triumphs. Let us know in the comments what you'd do if you were in Rebecca's shoes. Would you give Thomas a second chance, or would you keep walking away? Let the conversation begin.